There is a certain kind of person who always says yes when everything inside them is screaming no. They hold a door open for someone who never says thank you. They absorb someone else's bad mood and somehow convince themselves they caused it. They shrink. Constantly. Quietly. Alone. They spend entire evenings replaying conversations, wondering if they were too much or not enough. They apologize for things that were never their fault. They carry the weight of everyone else's comfort while slowly suffocating under the pressure of their own unspoken needs. But if you know someone like this, or if you are someone like this, please understand something deeply important. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is a psychological pattern with real roots, real science, and a very real path forward. Today we are going to decode the psychology of people who let others walk all over them. Why it began. How it lives in the body and the brain. What it costs them. And most importantly, what they can finally do to reclaim themselves without guilt and without shame. So why does this happen? Why do some people give endlessly while others take without hesitation? The answer lives in two very different origin stories. Two very different psychological blueprints. And both are completely understandable once you see them clearly. The first group is wired this way from birth. These are highly sensitive persons, a real neurological trait called sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS, identified by psychologist Elaine Aron. Their nervous systems are literally built to feel more. They process social cues deeper. They register emotional shifts faster. Their empathy is not learned. It is biology. The second group was built this way by survival. Imagine a child who learned very early that love was conditional. That approval had to be earned through silence, helpfulness, or smallness. Maybe a parent's mood was unpredictable. Maybe disagreement led to punishment. So the child chose peace over truth. Every single time. In both cases, the brain structure most responsible is the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. In people who are conditioned to please, the amygdala links conflict with danger. Saying no does not feel like a choice. It fires like an alarm. The body floods with cortisol, the stress hormone, before the word even forms. Over time, this survival response became identity. Helpfulness became a personality. Agreeableness became a mask. The body learned that staying small was safe. That being needed was the closest thing to being loved. And so the pattern locked itself in, deep and invisible. So when this enters adult life, it does not arrive as a memory. It arrives as a reflex. A tightening in the chest when someone seems displeased. A rush to fix the room's tension before anyone asks. A pattern so automatic it feels like who they are. But it is not. It never was. The first sign is the inability to say no without a wave of guilt crashing in immediately after. They do not simply decline. They negotiate with their own conscience for hours afterward. They rehearse explanations. They over-apologize. They offer alternatives they do not want to offer. As though their no requires a legal defense. Picture this. A colleague asks them to stay late again, the third time this week. They want desperately to say no. They have plans. They are exhausted. But they see the colleague's tired face and something shifts inside them. They hear themselves saying yes before the decision was ever made. This happens because their prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of the brain, gets hijacked by the amygdala's threat response the moment conflict appears on the horizon. The guilt they feel is not moral. It is neurological. Their brain has coded refusal as abandonment and abandonment as annihilation. The emotional consequence is a deep and chronic resentment that they often cannot even name. They do not feel angry at others. They feel angry at themselves for being this way. They lie awake wondering why they cannot just be normal. Why they cannot simply say a word that has only 2 letters. And this inability to say no bleeds directly into the next sign, which is even harder to see from the outside. The second sign is hyper-monitoring other people's emotions as though their own safety depends on it. Because for a long time, it did. They walk into a room and before they take off their coat, they have already scanned every face for signs of displeasure. This is not intuition. This is hypervigilance. A partner comes home and sets their keys down slightly harder than usual. Nothing else changes. No words. No expression. But this person notices the sound. And within seconds, a whole internal story assembles itself. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Should I ask? Should I wait? Should I fix it? This is the default mode network, or DMN, running in overdrive. The DMN is the brain's self-referential network, active during rumination and social prediction. In people with this pattern, the DMN never fully rests. It runs simulations constantly, trying to predict threat before it arrives. It is exhausting work done entirely in silence. The emotional consequence is a permanent low-level anxiety. A sense that peace is always one wrong expression away from collapse. They cannot simply relax in another person's presence. Relaxation itself feels dangerous. Like something they will pay for the moment they stop watching. This constant surveillance of others creates a painful blindness, and that blindness is the next sign they carry silently. The third sign is chronic self-neglect dressed up as selflessness. They will cancel their own rest for someone else's convenience. They will eat last, speak last, and need last. To the world, they appear generous. Inside, there is a slow hollowing. A hunger that keeps getting postponed and postponed until they forget it was ever there. A mother, a friend, a partner, a co-worker. Any role where they are needed. They will hold the crying friend together at midnight while their own grief waits patiently on a shelf. They have learned so deeply that their needs are secondary that they have stopped feeling them as urgent. Only other people's pain registers as real emergency. The brain region most silenced here is the insular cortex, responsible for interoception, which is the brain's ability to sense and interpret the body's internal signals. Hunger, fatigue, pain, desire. In people with this pattern, interoceptive signals are chronically suppressed. The body whispers, and they have learned not to hear it. The consequence is not just exhaustion. It is a deep disorientation about who they even are beneath all the giving. One day they look up and realize they do not know what they like, what they want, or what they actually feel. They have been a mirror for so long they forgot they were a window, and this forgetting of self leads directly to the next sign that defines their invisible daily struggle. The fourth sign is over-explaining and over-justifying every choice they make. They do not simply make a decision. They build a case for it. They anticipate every possible objection. They pre-apologize for taking up space, for having preferences, for existing in a way that might inconvenience someone. Every choice arrives wrapped in unnecessary evidence. They turn down an invitation and write a paragraph. They ask for a day off and volunteer 3 reasons before their manager has even blinked. They order food at a restaurant and explain why they chose that dish to the waiter who did not ask. The explanation is not communication. It is preemptive surrender. This is metacognition turned against the self. Metacognition is the brain's ability to think about its own thinking. In people with this pattern, metacognition does not help them reflect clearly. It loops. It predicts judgment and prepares defenses before any judgment has arrived. It is cognitive empathy weaponized inward. The emotional consequence is an exhausting performance of worthiness. Every day is an audition. They are never simply living. They are justifying their right to live. And no amount of external approval ever quiets the internal court that keeps calling them back to stand trial. This performance never quite ends, and it creates one final sign that quietly closes the door on their deepest relationships. The fifth sign is swallowing their truth to keep the peace. They know what they think. They know what they feel. But when the moment comes to say it, something tightens in the throat. The thought dissolves. They nod instead. They agree. They choose the quiet lie of agreement over the honest risk of conflict. Imagine a relationship where one person always defers, always softens their truth, always says it is fine when it is not. On the surface, there is no conflict. But underneath, there is a growing distance, a widening silence where intimacy was supposed to live. They chose peace so many times that peace became its own kind of loneliness. This silencing activates the theory of mind network in reverse. Theory of mind is the brain's capacity to model what others think and feel. In healthy use, It builds connection. In this pattern, it becomes a calculator of risk. They model the other person's possible reaction, predict discomfort, and preemptively delete themselves to avoid it. The consequence is a life lived at the edges. They are present in every room but absent from every conversation that matters. They are loved, often, but rarely truly known. And the deepest longing underneath all of this pattern is simply to be known. Fully. Safely. Without having to disappear first. And it is that longing, that honest ache, that connects every single one of these signs together into one human story. And here is what most people never stop to realize. The person who lets the world walk all over them is not passive. They are not weak. They are working harder than almost anyone else in the room. They are managing emotions, predicting outcomes, absorbing tension, and holding space for everyone while their own inner world goes unseen. They deserve to be witnessed. They deserve to rest. So what can they do? They cannot simply turn this off. They cannot white-knuckle their way into confidence. The pattern lives in the nervous system, not the willpower. Real change requires rewiring, gently and honestly, from the inside out. And it begins with 3 principles that actually reach the root. The first principle is learning to feel the no before speaking it. The second is building a tolerance for another person's temporary discomfort. The third is practicing self-disclosure in small, safe moments until honesty stops feeling like a threat. These are not affirmations. They are neurological exercises that rebuild the brain's response to conflict. The first principle begins in the body. Before they speak, they pause and locate the feeling in their chest. That tightening is the amygdala firing. They name it out loud to themselves. This is my nervous system, not the truth. Research on affect labeling shows that simply naming an emotional state reduces amygdala activation. The body can begin to trust that honesty will not destroy them. The second principle asks them to practice sitting with another person's disappointment without immediately rescuing them from it. Someone is unhappy that they said no. They resist the urge to fix it. They breathe. They remind themselves that another adult's emotion is not their emergency. This trains the prefrontal cortex to override the panic response, slowly, one tolerated moment at a time. The third principle is the most tender. They choose one small truth each day to speak aloud in a safe relationship. Not a confrontation. Not a speech. Just one honest sentence. I actually did not enjoy that. I was hoping for something different. Small disclosures rebuild the neural pathway between inner knowing and outer voice. The gap between self and expression slowly closes. When they practice this letting go of constant peacekeeping, something shifts that cannot be unseen. They discover that most people do not collapse when given an honest no. They find that being known, even slightly, feels safer than being approved of. They begin to take up space not aggressively but quietly, warmly, like someone finally coming home. They stop being the endless mirror that reflects everyone else. And they become, gently, a candle. Giving light. But also warm. Also present. Also burning with something entirely their own. These are people who think deeply, feel everything, and carry others with extraordinary care. That sensitivity is not the problem. It was never the problem. The only shift needed is learning to turn even one small fraction of that care back toward themselves without calling it selfishness. If this feels familiar, leave a comment below and tell me which sign fits you most. Sign 1, the guilt after no. Sign 2, the constant emotional scanning. Sign 3, the self-neglect. Sign 4, the over-explaining. Or sign 5, the swallowed truth. Your answer might surprise you. If this video helped you feel even a little lighter, a little less alone in your own pattern, press like and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, because every week we go deep into the psychology of being human, together.